Hey everyone, Hunter Hodes here with the Locked On Penguins podcast, giving you a little bit of a PSA before you dive into the latest edition of the show with Jesse Marshall. So during the episode, and I didn't find this out until after the episode finished recording, StreamYard, which is the platform that I use to record every single episode for the podcast, randomly decided to change my microphone settings to the pre-built-in microphone on my PC, not the regular one that I have been using for well over a year now. So you may notice a little bit of a difference in my voice. You're still able to hear me pretty clearly, but it's not as good as normal. I apologize on that. That's the first time that this has happened in a very long time, and it's going to be the last time that this happens for as long as I am hosting the show. So just want to give you all a little bit of a warning when it comes to that. And without further ado, here is the latest episode with Jesse Marshall of The Athletic.
Are we undervaluing the offseason that Penguins president of hockey operations, Kyle Dubas, has had so far? Jesse Marshall and I will dive into that right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen / watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. You can make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Joining me now, as I teased to open the show today, is Jesse Marshall of The Athletic and McKeens Hockey. He has not been on the show in about, I think I would say 5-6 weeks now, before free agency, that is. But Jesse, really appreciate you jumping on to discuss a whole bunch of topics relating to the Penguins again.
Always nice to talk about hockey in the summer. Happy to join you, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I had some nice early morning reading when I got up at about 8:30, 9 o'clock today. And I read Dom Luszczyszyn's article. If I mispronounce his last name,
that's as good as it's going to get right there, buddy. That's you can't get much better than that. Good job.
Perfect. That's what we're looking for here on this episode of the podcast. We can just end the show after that, honestly. But he wrote his annual rankings of the most improved teams during free agency versus the least improved teams during free agency. And he had the Penguins pretty high up there. He had the Penguins number 3rd as the 3rd most improved team of the offseason to date. Honestly, Jesse, I was taken aback by that. I mean, I've liked the moves that Kyle Dubas has made for the most part. The bottom 6, I think, is definitely better heading into the season. Riley Smith for Jason Zucker, the Tristan Jarry contract, a little bit mixed on that, but if he plays well, that would be awesome. But when he wrote in his article that Riley Smith would give the Penguins 1.5 more goals in terms of goal differential over Jason Zucker, that was interesting because Smith may not score as many goals as Zucker, but his play in the defensive zone, his play in transition, I think that really adds that value bottom 6-wise. Eller, Achari, and Nieto at almost 3 goals in terms of goal differential and value. That makes sense because they're all very good defensive players over the likes of Ryan Poehling, Nick Bonino. And it's funny that he put Nick Bonino in there because he didn't even play 5 games for the Penguins when he came over. And Josh Archibald, who had a pretty good defensive season. He ranked in the 92nd percentile for 5-on-5 even strength defense if you look at JFresh's model. And then Ryan Graves, who's rated 5 more goals in terms of goal differential. But that makes sense because Brian Dumoulin is just not the same player anymore. When you read this article, and specifically that part of this article, were you surprised that the Penguins were that high up?
Yes. I thought there were teams that did, better business than they did. The Devils, for instance, they brought in Colin Miller and Tyler Toffoli, but they lost a lot of players at the same time. So it cancels out a little bit of the goal differential, right? I guess I maybe overestimated perhaps the moves that other teams found themselves with, and how that the Penguins sort of juxtaposed into that. I think, out of sight, out of mind, probably forgot how bad the bottom 6 was. I think a lot of the add in that goal differential is not coming from offense and from goal scoring. It's coming from goal prevention on the other side of the ice, and just having a better defensive team that's more sound and a bottom six that, knock on wood, hopefully isn't going to get caved in and destroyed every single night. And you can almost I know for me personally, I can live with low event hockey if it's not, if you're playing it somewhere other than the defensive zone. Low event hockey with you living in the offensive zone a lot of the time is fine with me. So I think, I guess I was a little bit surprised. Do you want to poo-poo on the parade now and depress everyone right after the good news of this article? We can articulate this in a different fashion that's maybe a little less sexy, if you will. 9 goals, you would say, is wow, that's a big differential. What a big add. But one goal, one singular goal, is worth a third of a standings point, right? One goal, a third of a standings point. That conventional math then would say 3 goals, right, is 1 point in the standings. 9 goals is 3 points. So now I'm going to take you over to my boy JFresh, right? Jack throws down standings estimated, preseason rankings for where he thinks teams are going to land, and the Penguins were not in the playoffs at all, had a marginal improvement, perhaps, if that, on their performance from last year. And I think there's the rub, right? So the Penguins improved by 9 goals, which is 3 standing points, which is not enough. Is not enough to move them into the stratosphere of the postseason. Now, Jack said in his thing, I don't know how much I buy this. There's there's maybe that's his Penguin bias talking. I don't know. I guess that's possible. But there are things that he cautioned against, I guess, in that piece. So we'll see. And Erik Karlsson would certainly change that goal differential. But if you look at it at face value, I don't think Erik Karlsson changes it enough to get them in the playoffs in that situation either. So you're stuck well, what the hell do you do? How, short of trading Brian Rust and packaging in another player to try to make this huge grand slam home run swing, hey, this team is where it is, man, right? Maybe we need to acknowledge, Hunter, that Kyle Dubas has done the best job he can. Maybe 9 goals, and it'll go up again. If they get Karlsson, that number's going to change. Well, let's just stay pat for a minute. Let's say that this deadlock with the Sharks never ends. They never get Karlsson. Maybe 9 goals is the best he could do with the circumstances and the money he had and the cards that were dealt him from the previous regime, because he's got a lot of crap, right? He's got Jeff Carter's. That's a problem. Mikael Granlund, there's a chance. There's still another buyout period that they'll have potentially an opportunity to leverage. Maybe he gets bought out. Maybe that's the piece that tips the scales on the Erik Karlsson thing. But there's 2 sides to this coin. They improved. They made a good improvement. They made an improvement that statistically says that they're the 3rd best improved team in the league. But it's so marginal that you could argue that it's not enough to get them to where they need to be.
You definitely can. And I'll continue to say, I don't mind the bottom 6 heading into the season. It can't be as bad as it was last year, where that unit had a minus 22 goal differential.
I'd eat my shoe if that happened with this group. Yeah,
literally
100%.
Minus 22 goal differential at 5-on-5 when the Crosby and Malkin lines were not on the ice. You can have a bottom 6 that doesn't bleed goals against and also doesn't score that much, but that can only go so far when, say, an injury or 2 happens in the top 6. That's the thing with the team right now. Their success is so predicated on everyone in the top 6 staying healthy again that it's pretty dicey. Evgeni Malkin, Sidney Crosby both played all 82 games this past season. Jake Gensel was relatively healthy. Rickard Rakell also relatively healthy. Brian Rust had a bit of a down year when he was relatively healthy. Can he bounce back next season? The success is still, again, predicated on this unit staying healthy, and then the bottom 6 being okay, when you're not out there, we're just going to shut things down and not allow anything in the defensive zone, but still let you guys go to work in the offensive zone. Another big thing, of course, the player of Tristan Jarry, he needs to just go back, to being able to make, say, especially on the penalty kill, but just overall at 5-on-5. This past season, Tristan Jarry ranked 97th in the league at 5-on-5 in high danger save percentage, even though the Penguins were 15th in the league in 5-on-5 high danger shots against.
Yeah.
They need better goaltending. That's
from that area specifically. But boy, he took care of the easy stuff though, didn't he? I guess that's great. I don't know. I was talking to somebody about this dude, Alex. I can't remember his handle on Twitter now, but we had a really good conversation about this today. We were talking about, goaltending as a whole. I feel silly. I almost feel silly complaining that Jari is unproven in certain areas because goaltending is just so like whimsical and stupid. Like, look at this year, like Sergei Bobrovsky, a guy who's chronically horrific in the playoffs. Like, traditionally bad, goes on this magical 3-round run, right? That ultimately crashes and burns at the worst possible time, right? Who saw Aiden Hill happening? Like, you and I both had him on our list of guys the Penguins could target as a reasonable backup option going into this year, which obviously that ship sailed, right? As soon as he went on his run. So goaltending is a crazy, it's voodoo, it's whimsical, but I just can't get past, for me, the fact that we have this whole, the whole goal of this is to get to the playoffs, right? And then hopefully see what happens, maybe go on a magical run. And that's like the one gigantic question mark on his report card. He was absent. He's been absent for most of this period, of this testing period. And when he's been present, he's been hurt, right? So it's not like we could really get an accurate gauge of what, the pressure of that situation does to his performance and psyche. And people can poo-poo that and call me a boomer. But look, like I have enough evidence in my back pocket of, just whimsical goalie performance changing in the postseason. I don't know, man. It's just, to me, it's just a big question, right? It's a big question. And they need consistently average goaltending. We've talked about that before on this very show. Average is what they need. They don't need anything more than that. They can live with average, and I think that they can survive. I think average last year gets them to the postseason for sure. Absolutely. That's all they need. And I just, there are long stretches of time where this player's either unavailability and lack of being around at all, or like whimsical inconsistency, right? Where it's just, and I understand, and I'm not, people within the organization have said to me, and as recently as this summer, that he is the type of player mentally who is just built in a way where he is not going to allow any negativity into his space, right? He won't do it. Just won't do it. Psychologically, he's not going to. So when you ask him questions that are like accountability based or performance based in times where he's not played well, it comes across as like aloof or like cocky. A lot of people were really upset with how he reacted to some of the goals he allowed last year and some of the performances he turned in. You go all the way back to, the Islanders series when he, it's sort of like, it was just whatever to him.
Vomited all over himself, basically.
Yeah, right. So I guess I get it, but it just, I don't know. The whole thing has got a bad vibe around it, Hunter. I just think he's a good, I don't want to say he's a bad goaltender.
He's just trying to stay healthy. That's the thing. I mean, yeah. He's proven healthy, to be good when healthy.
I think out of his own way, like when he's, there are just stretches of time where he loses it, and hockey in of itself is an ebb and flow roller coaster. But I just think there are times where, it goes away from him completely, and you don't have the infrastructure in the rest of your org to support that. Now, maybe Alex Nedeljkovic goes on this like unbelievable, resurgence and climbs back to the level he was at 3 years ago. And that would be phenomenal, right? That'd be great. But that's yet to be seen. And, there are concerns about his consistency, probably threefold that you have of Tristan Jarry. So,
is he going to beat out Casey DeSmith?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, for sure. I think so. Yeah. I think he's the better goaltender. Yeah.
Okay.
Albeit grossly inconsistent, but I also don't, I have guesses about what this will look like come, camp time. And I don't know. I still think that like in any that's still I know it sounds crazy to say Dubas still wants to upgrade goaltending and he's signed 9 goaltenders, but I still think that's something he wants to upgrade. I still think it's on his list. I don't think he's scratched that off yet, dude. Like, I think that's, when you hear like these I truly believe at one point in time, I don't know if this is still true, but I truly believe that Kakinen's name was up in these deals too with Karlsson at one point. And I think for the same reason, I think he's trying to, historically speaking, Kyle Dubas has always tried to accumulate a lot of parts. He's never, I don't think he's really ever, outside of going after Matt Murray, that was his attempt to go for a surefire number 1 that backfired on him. But like, I think he's looking to accumulate more there. So I don't think that work is done.
Well, it would be kind of funny if they did go out and get another goalie. I don't think it's going to be someone.
I think they'd have to ship one out. Yeah.
I think Casey DeSmith would probably be involved in a trade for Erik Karlsson.
I think so too. Yeah.
Something like that.
Or another trade somewhere else, that we haven't even thought of yet.
Hey, you never know. It's still July 19th here. We got a while until training camp comes back up. But yeah, I mean, they just need Tristan to stay healthy, stay consistent. If he can play the way he did during the 2021-2022 season, I like their chances a lot more going into next season. I still see the Penguins as a playoff team right now, Jesse, even without the Karlsson deal. Obviously, that vaults them even higher, I think, in the playoff, list of teams in the Eastern Conferences. I know the conference is so deep. But right now, in terms of the Metropolitan Division with what they've done, I still think they're a wild card team because I think the top 6 is good enough to get it done. Tristan Jarry has shown an ability to give them at least average goaltending. He just has to stay healthy. If the bottom 6 can stay healthy and not give up a lot of goals at that end, that'd be nice. We talked about it. They need saves. They need average goaltending. You need your starting goalie to not be almost 100th in 5-on-5 high danger save percentage. He also needs to be better on the penalty kill. The PK last season, in terms of expected goals, was 13th at 5-on-5.
Yeah.
Pretty decent. I mean, PK wasn't as good as I think we all wanted it to be, but
we got a huge improvement this offseason. So, I mean, that's probably the one area that I think everybody should be feeling the best about. In terms of the work that's been done, is it should be completely different. So, a lot of the problem children from the penalty kill have been moved on to other pastures, and a lot of the guys that they brought in, like Riley Smith, especially, is somebody that you could throw out there and get a lot of good results from. So I'm excited to see what it looks like. I think with this kind of personnel, maybe the opportunity to get a little bit more aggressive and go a little bit more power kill with it. It matches their system, I think. And I think there's a timer on the Penguins, Hunter. I think that there's a clock for them when that puck gets in the zone and the other team establishes possession. They have they have a leash of when they can go all out on it. But I'd maybe like to see that extended even a little bit with some of these new characters on the squad and give them a little bit more leeway to go out and just, be super full press aggressive. I think you look around the league at the good penalty kills. That's what everybody's doing right now, right? That power kill strategy, where you let your 2 forwards eat and just run around like maniacs. You even take your other defenseman and get them up in there and being aggressive in the circles and stuff like that. That's the trend right now. I think you look at Seattle, you look at Florida, the way they handled their business. Colorado the year before, that's the way they did it. So you've got the personnel to maybe like run that kind of setup now and still focus on the way you wanted to do it before, which is like, getting to where the puck is and overloading the puck side. But you can turn that up a notch, I think, now even a little bit.
Everyone that they got this offseason can kill penalties at a very high rate. And I think you will see this unit in the top 10 this upcoming season. That wraps up.
Goaltending dependent, right?
What do you say?
Goaltender is your most important penalty killer.
Yes.
So, it goes back to what we said more, but if they get the goaltending, I agree with that. Yeah.
I agree too. Tristan Jarry in both cases, whether it's Casey DeSmith, whether it's Alex Nedeljkovic, whoever is in the net, they just have to not give up goals every time the PK is on the ice. But that wraps up this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to discuss some more milestones that the Penguins could have for some of their players this upcoming season, especially Evgeni Malkin, maybe Kris Letang as well. But before we discuss that, take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just that $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run in the game. And it's all an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball and Locked On. All right, I'm back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes. That is Jesse Marshall. Jesse, I made a couple of boo-boos on my Monday episode when I was discussing some Sidney Crosby milestones because I had the stat right in front of me, and I accidentally said that Sid has played in 250 less games than Alex Ovechkin, but it was 157. I apologize on that. And I also forgot to mention that Crosby is one more season away this upcoming season from tying Wayne Gretzky's record of 19 straight point-per-game seasons.
Yes.
Apologize for not mentioning that as well. Discussed Sid, a whole bunch of milestones. I think he's going to hit the top 10 in all-time scoring this upcoming season. But Evgeni Malkin, I think, is also closing in on a couple of major milestones as well. Right now is tied for 43rd all-time with 1,229 points in 1,063 games. In fact, he's only 8 points behind Patrick Kane, and he's played in a little over 100 less games played than Kane. That just goes to show how dominant he has been throughout his career
this year too. I think that's probably a safe assumption.
Yeah, I think he will pass him, considering that
I think so. Yeah, for sure.
He had the hip surgery.
Yeah.
And my point that I was making is that I will never forget back in 2017 when these morons just did not include Evgeni Malkin on the top 100 players list of all time. I think at worst he's a top 20 to 30 player to ever play this sport. But this upcoming season, he's closing in on 1,300 points, needs 71 to get that. It's obviously pretty funny considering he's at 12.9. And he, in terms of overall, like how high he can go, I honestly think Jesse 1,400 is a pretty good goal for him. That's about 171 points throughout the rest of his career. I think if he stays healthy, maybe he goes a point per game this season. He can maybe have 50 points next year, 60 points, or flip-flop that, 60 points next year, 50 points after that. He'll hit 1,400, no problem. I don't think he's ever going to hit 1,500 like Sid just did, but 1,400 plus, that's pretty good for someone who has missed quite a bit of time.
Moves him into the top 25 all time.
Yes.
Among like some really unbelievable play, like Brett Hall. He'd be ahead of Brett Hall. Where he lands depending on, Yari Curry is another name. He'd probably be ahead there. So, yeah.
He would.
That'd be great. I'd love to see that happen. It's always that like, and somebody asked me this, which is like depressing to start thinking about this stuff. But they're like, what's the legacy of Evgeni Malkin and like blah, blah, blah. And like, having watched like the early 90s era Penguins and everything, I don't know that I could ever really pinpoint a player like this, like Malkin. He's just so individual and so unique, and there's a blend of so many different things. I'd love to see him get to an echelon that is like hater proof. You know what I mean? That's like he's shielded from all the nonsense discussions that are going to inevitably come his way, which, by the way, I don't mind saying this on your show. They're rooted in xenophobia and just anti-Russian bias, which is stupid and dumb. There are a lot of forwards out there that are North American that are worse in the defensive zone than Evgeni Malkin and don't catch half as much criticism as he does. If his name was Mike Malkin from London, Ontario, he'd a lot of different narrative. He'd have been on that list you mentioned, I tell you that much. He'd have been on that list. So, it is what it is. But, that'd be great. If he got in the top 25, there are not many rocks you're going to be able to throw at him. And with 3 cups and a Conn Smythe to his name, like top 25 all time, you're going to the Hall of Fame. So, yeah, I'd love that. That'd be great.
Didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I was saying, if he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, you can just send the Hall of Fame to the Shadow Realm because.
Yeah, dude, here's the thing. Look at how long Pierre Turgeon had to wait to get in, and I understand like he opted out of a fight in the 1980s and people held a grudge for that for 40 years against him, and he finally got over it, which is a whole other side for a podcast we could do another day. But I don't think people have that level of bias against Malkin, but like, I don't know, first ballot. I hope you're right. I don't know. I'm not as sure as you are. I hope you're right.
Buddy,
I just think there's a lot of people out there that draw, really nonsensical narratives about him, like Here, I'll just give you a snippet. This is just, and then we can continue on. But like, think about the time Richards caught him behind the net, right? And like, he got hurt, right? Gotta drug himself back into the play, and the announcers call on that was he was basket hanging, right? And people accused him of cherry picking. He literally pulled himself up off the ice from getting the wind taken out of him like a freight train, drug himself back to center ice and got a lead pass. Like, you know, so it's just like even like historical things like that are viewed through this lens outside of Pittsburgh of like lazy Russian catches lucky break. Dude, like he got blasted, picked himself up, drug himself back 100 feet, and you know, sure he got a great pass, but like, you know, it just, I think stuff like that, you know, it's just, to me, it lingers around, you know, and like that's, you know, it's tough to shake that reputation. You think about like the Zetterberg stuff in the Cup final, people still bring that up as like, you know, he's some kind of cheap shot artist or something, which I always think is so funny. So the sentiment is out there. It just is, you know what I mean? Like I'll do my part to spin that PR about and, you know, remind everybody how disgustingly dominant he was as a hockey player, but you know, he's going to get in. I don't, you know, and I don't care when in it. First ballot would be great, but he's getting in. There's no denying it. You can't, you know, you can only dilly-dally around it for so long. The numbers speak for themselves.
Absolutely. And heck, Jesse, I'm still mad that Alexander McGillney is still not in the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is
that's the next one, man. Now that we got Turgeon in, McGillney's, I think, probably the most outstanding one left, I think, right? Yeah.
He needs to get in. And speaking, going back to Malkin a little bit, if he does get to 1,300 this season, which is his next milestone points-wise, he would tie Jarome Iginla for 36th all-time in NHL scoring, would pass the likes of Phil Housley, Peter Stastny, Al McInnes. Next season, probably going to pass Pierre Turgeon, Gil Perreault, Dennis Savard probably, Matt Sundin. And you're right, Jesse, if he does get to 1,400 right now, that would be 23rd all-time in the history of scoring in the NHL, above Yari Curry, above Brett Hull, Mike Modano, Brendan Shanahan, Luke Robitaille.
Yeah.
That would be pretty awesome to see that. And
we're mentioning a lot of names here, Hunter. We should call this out. We're mentioning a lot of names here, Hunter, that have like 500 more games played than him.
Yes.
Right? Like this is the discrepancy in games played. Like Iginla has played over 1,500 games, right? Malkin just cracked 1,000 last year. So pretty big difference, right? Like he has found himself on this list. Like just looking at it now, only Peter Stastny is out there with less games played than him, and who is a generational talent, by the way. So, yeah, I mean, good company to be in, and good company to be in with way less games played to your name, in an era that's not exactly the most high-scoring era of all time.
Agreed. And he's 29 goals away from his 500th, which I do think he's going to hit this season if he stays healthy. So, a couple big milestones coming up for Evgeni Malkin. Shifting a little bit to Kris Letang. Right now, he ranks 29th all-time in terms of all-time point leaders for defensemen in NHL history. 156 goals, 691 points in 1,005 games. He needs 8 more points to pass Chris Pronger, who is one of the greatest defensemen I've ever watched growing up.
Yeah.
He also, if he can this season, if he gets 50 points, which if he stays healthy, I think he could, even though he's a bit older, he would pass Scott Niedermayer, another very good defenseman, for 25th all-time on the list. And even higher than that, potentially, you have guys like Sergei Zubov, who is 20th all-time right now among defensemen in points, Rob Blake, Sergei Gonchar's at 17 with 811. Kris Letang needs 65 assists to get to 600 assists. I think he's going to get that probably by next season. But I don't think it's a hot take to say, Jesse, but that by the time Letang retires, he's going to be top 20 all time in terms of points by a defenseman in NHL history. And that just goes to show how amazing he's been throughout his career.
Yeah, another Hall of Famer, I think.
Yes.
Pretty much slam dunk for me anyway. But something I like to mention here that I think is like good to look back on is Craig Patrick's work in picking him, right? This is coming out of the lockout. Like we haven't even played a single game with the rule changes where the red line's been taken out. We're back to no 2-line pass. rule changes are being enforced where you can't clothesline and suplex people. Mentioning Pronger and Niedermeyer as two guys who were pretty good at that in their time. But, like Letang, it was unheard of, frankly, to draft a defenseman as small as him. It was just, it didn't happen. And it's one of the reasons why he fell. He played alongside Luc Bourdon at Val d'Or, rest in peace. Luc Bourdon passed away in a motorcycle accident not too long after that, right after his NHL debut. But Letang was sort of like, I would almost argue written off, because Bourdon was so much bigger. They were the same kind of player, similar in sense, but the difference was the height and the size. And that's, for Patrick to take a defenseman that was as small as Letang was at the time was like even smaller than, he is now. I mean, he was a child back then. It took a lot of foresight for Patrick to know that the league was going to change, that puck moving fast, quick skating defensemen were going to be at a premium. And that Letang was that guy. That was who he was. Bourdon gets traded off that team, off Val d'Or. Letang becomes the number one defenseman, and then goes on to have one of the most dominant junior careers I've ever seen from a defenseman, period. So I always call it out because, it's funny you mention these numbers and you think about these numbers now, but way back in the day, like, in that early 2000s period, when that draft pick got made, a lot of people were like, you got to be crazy taking somebody that small. And now, maybe not. That was like Craig Patrick's last great gift to the Penguins, was Kris Letang.
And he's done all of this as a third-round pick in the NHL draft. And sometimes, the draft is a crapshoot for a lot of ways. The fact that they've gotten this production out of a former third-round pick, that's awesome. And he'll go down as, I think, the best defenseman in franchise history in terms of how long he's been here and all that. But a couple really big milestones coming up for him. A lot of legendary players that he's going to pass pretty soon as well. But that wraps up the second segment. Coming up to end the show, Jesse and I are going to go over our breakout players for the Penguins for this upcoming season. So stick around for that, coming up right after this. All right, and we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. This is Jesse Marshall from the Athletic and McKeens Hockey. So, Jesse, I don't think the Penguins have too many quote-unquote breakout players coming for this season just because, they have a lot of veterans on the team. Let's just face it. They have a lot of guys who have been in the league for a long time. But the player who I think could break out for the Penguins this upcoming season is someone who I've talked about at length on the show numerous times this offseason, and that is Drew O'Connor, who has yet to sign his contract. Arbitration starts on Thursday, July 20th. His arbitration date is August 4th. I still think they're going to have a contract done before then, but who truly knows at this point? Had 8 points in 10 games during the World Championships, 5 goals, 11 points in 46 games this past season. I keep saying it. It's time to find out what the Penguins have in this guy. He brings offense to the table. He's decent in transition. He can play in the defensive zone. He, I think, is one of the better offensive players in the bottom six, in my opinion. And if he gets the minutes, I really think he could be a big breakout player for this team. And I'm not saying he's going to score you 20 to 25 goals in the bottom six. Let's pump the brakes on that. But who says in a full 82-game season, if he breaks out, he can't score 11 to 13, 14 goals, be one of the better depth scorers in the bottom six? Who is your breakout player heading into the season?
I unfortunately don't think there's another option. I mean, I guess, what I would do is give a shout. And it sounds stupid to say this, but there's a very real possibility in my mind that Pierre-Olivier Joseph could take a big step forward this year and give you more than he gave you last year. I don't know that you could quantify that as a breakout performance, right? He's more of an established player at this point. But I think it could be breakout for him, right? That would be a positive. That's really, I think, the only possible alternative you could give here. But the expectation is that Drew O'Connor will give something big to this team based off the performance he's just coming off of internationally. That was probably obviously not as difficult of a stage per se, but you want to see a player grab that stage by the scruff and make do with it. And he did. So he exhibited, I think, finish on all the flash that he gave the team or some of the flash they gave the team in the regular season. And yeah, I think there's utility with him. That's the great thing. And if you think about needing a shift late in a game, down a goal, or it's tied, or you're trying to snatch momentum back, and you're trying to get back in it, those depth lines sometimes play crucial roles. I mean, you think about like back when you had Tanev, Aston Reese, and Bluger at their best, or the Matt Cullen lines of the Cup years, you could deploy them and they'd change the game, right? They'd flip the game on its head and give you a little bit of that pizzazz back and momentum. He's the kind of player that could do that, and that's just because he's not afraid to get and mix it up on that forecheck, get in there and bang around and get loose pucks. Put the waders on and get into the shit a little bit, if you will. That's great. I think that's fantastic. So, I'm with you, Hunter. I don't know that there's a lot as far as his offensive ceiling is concerned, but I think what we would both say is that he's exhibited a knack historically for getting to areas where you score goals. And that is half the battle. He may not have ridiculous hands. He may not have an offensive toolbox that's super deep, but if you just getting to those battle areas, getting to anticipate, using your anticipation to get to where pucks are going to be, understand the cycle, these are all things that he's shown he can do. And that's all you really care about from a bottom six forward. I think at the end of the day, if he can give you that, that's a net win.
I agree. And I know he'll be playing with defensive-minded players in the bottom six, maybe like a Lars Eller, maybe like a Noah Chari, players who aren't going to give you a lot of offense, but if you can have someone on that line that can, like an O'Connor, that could go a long way towards helping out the top six when they have some off nights. Because let's face it, they're not going to be on their A game every single game this upcoming season. And they're going to need some games where someone in the bottom six steps up. And maybe that someone is Drew O'Connor. Another player who I could put in there, if he makes the team, Jesse, Ty Smith, if he's on it, I mean, that spot against P.O. Joseph is going to be a pretty cool training camp battle. He just re-signed 1 year, $775,000. Maybe one of them is included in the Erik Karlsson trade if that goes through. Who knows at this point? The game of chicken continues.
Is there a roster player that hasn't been brought up? The top six aside, I feel like everybody else's name has been bantied about in some fashion. So why not him too, right? I mean, put everybody in there.
No, I know. And again, it'll be a cool training camp battle. I was of the opinion last year that Ty should have won it, but they couldn't keep him there because they had no salary cap room.
Yeah.
Another player, this is probably a bit unfair, and maybe this is weird to say. I know he's coming off a 28-goal season. What about Rickard Rakell scoring 35 to 40 next year? Would that count as a quote-unquote breakout?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because it's the same kind of idea I gave you earlier, right? It's a breakout for them, right? It's individually a breakout year. So, yeah, I mean, that would be nuts. That would be crazy. What did he pace out at last year after he came here? Do you know? I don't know. I'd have to look it up. That has to be interesting, something for your next show, perhaps. I could see him scoring 30 for sure. Yeah, I think he could score 30. What's tough is the lack of power. What kind of power play time is he getting? What's that look like? I mean, I feel like that's on this team is pretty, without that, you lose a lot of that special teams ability to rack up some of those goals. But either way, I mean, I think whether he's on the first line or the second line, depending on, I think it's probably safe to say he's going to be on the first line, but no matter where he goes in that top six, he plays such a crucial role in opening up space that would certainly be an exciting one. Yeah, for sure. Or what if Riley Smith puts up 30? That'd be crazy. Playing with Malkin, I don't think that's going to happen, but that'd be a pleasant surprise too. Maybe throw that name into the mix.
He only had one less goal than Jason Zucker this past season, finished with 26. Zucker at 27. So, hey, maybe he does playing with a center and up getting Malkin and getting some power play time. With Rakell, he scored 30 before. He scored 33 in one season and 34 in another. So, hey, maybe he does get the power play time if they don't get Karlsson, scores 35, 40. Again, I don't know if it was truly fair to put him there, but I did just because, again, hey, it's July 19th. Before I let you go, though, Jesse, have you heard anything on the Erik Karlsson situation? It is the question that everyone wants to know. This game of chicken right now that Mike Greer is playing because he wants Carolina and Pittsburgh, I guess, to bid against each other and to just give him something that he hasn't had yet. Is there anything new on that? And just where do you stand on the Karlsson side?
Yeah, I got nothing. Nothing. I wish I could tell you. I'm for it though. For me, this is a generational talent at defense. Even at his age, right? Look at what he did last year. I know it'd be tough to replicate that. I think it'd be difficult to get that exact same performance out of him, even maybe, given that he's going to deteriorate a little bit physically, and you hope he could stay healthy. And is he going to be getting the same ice time here? Probably not. So I question that, but the vibes would be great for sure. You just can't deny the impact he has on a hockey team, right? And for a lot of people want to make a big to-do out of his, I guess, not perceived lack of, because it's a very real lack of defensive impact, but the net positive is still so great because of what he could do offensively. I think him here in Pittsburgh could potentially change a lot of things, especially this stale, boring, just blase power play breakout that they have is just so bad.
Yes.
They throw that drop pass in the garbage, chuck the whole thing out the window, and just let Erik Karlsson do it himself. Even if that means you have to play I don't care. Let him figure it out. So I think you almost have to. You can't go in. You look. Here's the thing. I said this at the beginning of the show. If they go get Erik Karlsson, I'm still not going to come on this program and tell you that they're a cup contending team. They're that far away to me. But you can't go into this year and not swing, right? What are we doing? Why are we here, right? That is, you're living in the Ron Hextall fear if you don't take the swing, right? We're here because there's a little bit of this window open and we want to maximize it. That is maximizing the window by definition. That is the encyclopedia definition of maximizing the window. So I'm here for it. I think it'd be a lot of fun to watch. I would selfishly like to see that as a hockey fan, that still enjoys this game. It would be fun to cut video of Erik Karlsson and make here's your November Erik Karlsson montage. That would be awesome. So I'm for it. I hope they find a way to get it done. I think, you're probably going to rule for me anyway. I don't know that if the Jeff Petrie thing is the crux of this, maybe you got to move on. I don't know. Maybe if he's not going to waive, then he's not going to waive. I don't think the stalemate's going to change that. So I don't know. I think it's going to have to be creative. Whatever he does, he's going to have to get creative with it. I just, don't overpay, right? You got to be careful. I think that's just my opinion on this could change drastically, Hunter, if they fork up too much for this. I think that's a very real thing. And I know I just said maximize the window, we're here for the vibes, but let's not take that too far, right? You have too many beers at that house party, and the next thing you know, you're hanging out the window by your underwear, throwing up all over yourself. So I'd like to avoid that if possible. And they said, I do agree with some of what Rossi said in that some of the proposals that have come through are just nonsensical. They're not real. They're made up. They're some of the weird Facebook NHL rumor sites that you see, you know what I mean? That's where they're getting this stuff from. So I caution this, and I don't know if this is real, but some of these people are oh yeah, 2 first-round picks. What?
Yeah, get out of here. That's not
I'm hanging the phone up, that's insane to me. So if it's the right deal and it's right for both teams and you can find a fair one, I'm all aboard 100%.
And the thing with the overpayment, I've been saying this on my show a lot these last few weeks. I don't think the Penguins can, because the Sharks have no leverage here. Erik Karlsson wants to be traded. He has the no move clause. Yeah. Mike Grier can continue playing this game for as long as he wants. Heck, maybe he wants to take it into training camp in the season. Oh, well, good luck with that value at the trade deadline, buddy. Right. Really.
Sure.
Good luck there. But
it would be so much improve, right? And what if he gets hurt? Then what do? You don't have a deal at all, right? So now what?
Agreed. Then you're really screwed at that point. But it would be so much fun watching him as a Penguin. It would make the team in general a lot more fun to watch, because there have been times these last couple of years, Jesse, where I'm man, this team is just kind of boring to watch. And I don't usually say that when they have 3 Hall of Famers and some other very, very good players on the team. But man, you add Karlsson to the mix, someone who is a one-man breakout from the defensive zone, someone who is a one-man wrecking crew in the offensive zone. Whew, sign me up there. He may not have 100 points, but he'll still put up enough points and be saddled with a defensive first player. I would like Marcus Pettersson, preferably with him, but I would also like him with Kris Letang. So there's kind of an interesting thing.
What's he do for that Crosby line, dude? Like, I mean, a guy like Jake Gensel, even like who I think is one of the most cerebral players in the league. How can he use a defenseman like that? You know, forget Crosby. What could Jake Gensel do with Erik Karlsson? You know, that's pretty fun to think about, right? And there's a lot of possibility there. And it changes who you pay attention to when they're on the ice, right? And the dynamic of defending Crosby changes. So it would be a lot of fun, and maybe open up some space for old man Sid, give him the opportunity to feast a little bit on some of these forwards.
Heck, Evgeni Malkin would also have a ton of fun.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. The same effect. Yeah. The same effect. Yep. Absolutely.
It would be great just seeing either one of the two centers just get passes and just play with Erik Karlsson so many minutes a night. As I was saying, with Karlsson, if you want to station him or saddle him, with Marcus Pettersson, that would be great. But I would also like Pettersson up on the top pairing. But I think they're going to flip-flop with Graves and Pettersson if they get Karlsson. But that's all discussion for another day, assuming that the trade happens. You have to have a third team in there. I've discussed this at length for the last few weeks now, kind of just waiting to see what happens at this point. But Jesse, really appreciate you taking the time to come on this episode of the podcast. What do you have coming up at the Athletic or McKeens Hockey, even though it's a little bit of the quote-unquote zombie days of the offseason?
It's not. So back to work next week.
Not for him.
Yeah, got the McKeens Hockey yearbooks coming out, right? So for this year. So I will be doing Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, and Columbus. I'll be handling all three of those teams for the yearbook. So get yourself a copy, prep for the season if you're into fantasy hockey. It's a great thing to take with you to your draft and arm yourself to the teeth. And you'll have all the scoop on those three teams from yours truly. So, yeah, that's what I got next.
Well, look for that coming up pretty soon. You can follow Jesse on Twitter at JMarshFOF. And again, thank you all so much for listening/watching this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I almost just said making this your first listen/watch of the day, but I've already said that a couple of times.
Maybe people have, and if you have, thank you.
Yes, thank you no matter what. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Friday as we continue the 3 episodes a week into the rest of July, August, and then into September. So again, thank you all so much for listening/watching. Really appreciate it. I'll be back with another episode on Friday.